related to competitiveness. So I think the smart specialization is not so much one about competitiveness in terms of low cost competitiveness, but more about higher value added, a higher road to, I think one of the speakers said yesterday, to progress. So I think that's very important. And this contrasts very much with the industrial policy that we had in the 1970s and 80s that focused on creating and supporting national champions. And it also goes beyond the horizontal policies that we had in the 90s around tax incentives, more horizontal policies, competition policy as well, that tried to level the playing field and let the market develop. I think it showed us also that in certain horizontal policies don't work the same way in each sector. It may work very well for some industries, but maybe not for others. So I think this that sectoral dimension was already emerging back in the 90s, and I think with the work by Dominique Faure, one of the fathers of the smart specialization, I think he really took this forward. One thing that's interesting in the whole smart specialization discussion is this tension between incumbents and new entrants. As I said, a lot of industrial policy of the past wanted to protect incumbents, and a lot of the smart specialization is also about encouraging the incumbents to invest in innovation, invest in human capital, but also fostering the new challengers, the small companies, the SMEs, and building up the capacity. A lot was said already about the absorptive capacity in the economies and the need for this. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. I think when we look at some of the innovation strategies of countries, I think that we see some common elements, some common principles. One is about supporting the public investment in public research, fostering business dynamics, but also fostering the circulation of knowledge. I think we saw yesterday also that a lot of discussion on supporting research and supporting the supply, but I think it's very important that we also think about the knowledge creation and diffusion. And this is where the clusters and the science parks and these partnerships are very important. So I think the creation of knowledge is one thing, but of the circulation, it has to be very important. Another thing we see more is increasingly the effects of digitalization on our economies. In every sector, there's a transformation going on in production, in design, in education. So I think this is something that can be actually a way to make our economies more competitive and that higher road I mentioned. Not so much in terms of a cost advantage. There will be some efficiency advantages from using technologies for energy, et cetera, smart grids. Of course, there will be some efficiencies, but there also will be some higher value added. So new possibilities, new links between the production of products with services, that I think that higher value added is what digitalization represents for the economies. Another principle that we see is important to foster this talent and the skills, and it's not just the investment in the science and math education, but also the kind of skills to work in a globalized system in terms of you need, on the one hand, the analytical skills, the numeracy skills. You need, of course, the computational skills, the relational skills. A lot of these partnerships are relational based. And we're doing now some new work at the OECD on skills and global value chains, looking at which skills help companies and countries engage in global production. So I think the skills element is a very important thing to be supported as part of these smart specialization strategies. The fifth point is the governance and implementation of these policies. I think there was some discussion yesterday on the multi-level governance, on the connections, involvement of stakeholders, on the connections between regional governments, national governments. And this is a very important issue, and it's not an easy one to deal with. And I think there's different ways countries and regions are dealing with it, and I think that's part of the learning from the experience. It's true there is a kind of natural tension between national policies which do not have a spatial dimension, like education and research funding, that focus more on excellence rather than on regional considerations, and then more regional policies and industrial policies that may have a sectoral approach. So I think that dialogue has to happen, and it has to happen through at the level of the national government. And there's many interesting attempts to do this. There's also attempts in terms of engaging the different stakeholders, the universities. In the Netherlands recently, the regional development agencies are working together with the universities on some of these issues. So I think getting the regional, the different stakeholders together is going to be very important for this. So as I said, establishing the strategy is one thing. The implementation is often another matter, and I think many of the countries here have gone through this phase of strategy development, and now you're in the implementation. I think 4 elements are maybe important in this regard to thinking about this. First of all, the importance of the credibility of the strategy. I think, as I said, stakeholder involvement is one thing to get some of this credibility and legitimacy in the strategy, but it also means that in terms of leveraging some of the credibility, it means that you have to ensure that your research and education policies are also lined up with your public procurement policies, that the business innovation policies that you have to support business R&D, for example, don't overly benefit the incumbents, the big companies that are already getting these tax breaks, that there are ways for SMEs to participate. So the credibility also has to be transformed in terms of some sort of actions as well. As I said, the universities and regional clusters are an important part of this. Now, the university is interesting because they're very globalized in many ways. Some of the leading universities have their global innovation networks, global research networks, but it's also linking them back into the regions and to the community. So I think that is also something. And then vice versa, for those universities that are much more regionally oriented, getting them to think outside of their own regions, of collaborating with other regions, other areas. And in this particular conference, I think one thing is important here is that the borders, in fact, are on the one hand, they reflect historical factors, but they're also one that can maybe they shouldn't be binding us too much in terms of this. And this means that sometimes we have to rethink some of the rules in government policy. I think in the OECD, there's maybe only 2 countries where public money could be used by companies in another country. I think it's Denmark and Sweden. So I mean, this is a big challenge in terms of opening up the national regulations to this kind of collaboration in practice, because it's one thing to cooperate in terms of exchange, but in terms of money, that's still a big barrier. I think another issue here is evaluation of policies and programs. It's something that everyone knows is important. It's something but it's often something that gets left to a technical evaluation, and then it gets put on the shelf. But there's very oftentimes not enough feedback into the policy discussions. So ensuring that some of these evaluations are actually discussed at these stakeholder events, I think could be very useful. And I think it also reinforces the legitimacy. You want transparency in the process, so sharing the evaluations, access to the data of the evaluations would also be important in terms of fostering more transparency, so that the stakeholders know, which companies were involved, what were the outcomes, etc. So I think with these kind of principles, I think that the smart specialization can establish public intervention on a solid market basis. So I think it's not anti-market, it can support market-driven allocation of resources, innovation. But coming back to my initial title of this, I think we need to reset in a way some of the thinking around the smart specialization. I see now that the Commission is moving forward with the specialized platforms around smart specialization for energy and food and different areas. And I think this is a very important move forward in terms of recognizing that these strategies have to be adapted to specific contexts, but also that they can use the enabling technologies. One of the ideas behind the smart specialization was that there are a lot of enabling technologies, generic technologies, that can be used to revitalize existing industries, but also create that diversity of innovation. And that's probably my last point, is this issue of diversity, that we need a diversity in terms of the strategies, but also in terms of their implementation. And maybe there's some issues for discussion here in terms of how much standardization you want. I think that you maybe need common terms, common language, because we're often dealing with issues that maybe in some regions you use different terminology, different scientific fields use different terminology to describe the same thing. So that's maybe a small problem, but I think the important issue is that diversity. So I think you need some diversity, but at the same time you need some common principles, common language, to understand whether you're talking about life sciences or biotechnology. Oftentimes people are talking about the same kinds of programs. So, and then within that, exactly being more precise in terms of some of the initiatives being taken up. So I think that maybe is my final point, that one region's specialization does not need to resemble that of another, and we need these common principles, such as stakeholder engagement, evaluation. Those are important, but I think also the specific multi-level governance is still something that we need to work on. So I think maybe with that I would open the debate and see what the other speakers may want to add to that. Thank you very much.
Hello. Good morning. First of all, my apologies for arriving late. Even in this age of GPS readily available, sometimes we do get lost, and this is what happened. My name is Eduardo Barreto from the European Commission, DG Regional and Urban Policy, and I'm very pleased to be here and very honored to be the moderator for this first session. As I was not here in the beginning, I would allow myself a couple of minutes just to say the following. We consider this smart specialization strategies, which have been for the first time in this current form and with this full-fledged methodology being implemented in this period, as one of the real key challenges for cohesion policy as well. And as we will see today, because we have different sessions, it's not just about implementing the strategy in the region or the country that actually drafted it. It's actually going interregional as well. It's finding areas of cooperation in terms of the different smart specialization strategies and building value chains across borders and across regions. And even, and this is the third and more ambitious step, integrating it as part of the macro-regional strategy. So we are trying to do this kind of multi-level ambition, and this is not an easy task. I mean, we have a full conscience of the difficulty that many regions have across Europe to actually implement their own strategies. One thing was to draft them, and this was difficult enough in many cases. Yet another bigger challenge is to actually implement them. So trying to go interregional, try to actually build these areas of cooperation across macro regions in Europe is even a bigger challenge. So we will try as much as possible to draw from the experience of this current period, because as some of you may know, the post-2020 period for cohesion policy is just around the corner in terms of actually starting to prepare, to have new thinking, to have conditions, to actually establish what we want to achieve in terms of that policy, in terms of the competitiveness policy for the region. So it's just around the corner. In fact, the Commission will, for next year, will be very active preparing its own proposals. So we need to draw from the experience that we have regarding the implementation of the smart specialization strategies. But I would just like to tell you, it's one of our biggest policy ambitions to actually make this a success, and not just as part of the regions, but also as part of an interregional approach and a macro-region approach also. So it's really a big challenge. Your experience, and many of you are very active actors in this process, your experience, your feedback will be very crucial for us, but I want to make sure you understand that this is one of the cornerstones of our policy for the future, that we would like to push forward into the next period as well. So now I don't want to take any more time from the distinguished speakers that we still we'll have time to listen to. I would like to ask Dr. Anwar Aridi then to take the floor and to make his presentation. Thank you very much. Dr. Aridi is an innovation specialist in the World Bank. I think you have his CV in the documentation that was distributed, so you have the floor.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Eduardo. I'm very delighted to be here. It's my first time in Trieste. The coffee is great. I've been over-caffeinated since I got here. So I work for the Trade and Competitiveness Global Practice at the World Bank, and it's the Europe and Central Asia Department. And the World Bank is not new to the work of smart specialization in the region, and we've worked with several countries. There are several counterparts in this conference. The title of my short presentation is How Can Research and Innovation Smart Specialization Strategies Realize the Potential? And the underlying assumption is several times they don't. So we'll discuss way. In this presentation, I'll briefly discuss the context and the rationale for smart specialization. Why do we need them? Our main concerns are basically a little bit of economics and mainly the challenge of implementation, which is the big chunk of smart specialization strategies. I'll highlight just 3 project experiences from the region, could be relevant to many of the attendees, and then I will leave you with few takeaways just to remember the main points of the presentation. So research and innovation smart specialization strategies basically address 2 very difficult questions. First, which is a very complicated question that we've been dealing with for more than 50 years basically, is how to better spend the money on R&D and how to make the best out of this spending in economic growth and raising the competitiveness of the region and improving the productivity of the firms. We've heard yesterday that Europe collectively spends at similar level to the US in public R&D money, but we don't get the same results. Why? How can we better align our R&D spending in the regions to produce this growth? This is a very complicated question, and that's one of the main drivers of these smart specialization strategies or industrial strategies or whatever you want to call them. This is basically one of the main drivers. The second main driver for this strategy is prioritization. How to pick the industries that we want to invest in. We don't have endless pockets. We have limited amount of money, and we want to prioritize and select. But we want to induce economic transformation in our regions, but we already know from the economic geography literature that agglomeration, which is created because of externalities, because of spillover effects, because of path dependency, create a pattern of core and peripheries. So we want, how can we induce a change in this core periphery pattern? We want to introduce this structure. Talking only about research and innovation, this could also be related to the environment, to the trade policy, to the horizontal policies that were discussed earlier. How to do this is also a very challenging question. Obviously, these questions are very difficult, and policymakers and public institutions alone cannot, on their own, deal with these kind of questions. So that our only choice is to go about it bottom up, to include as much stakeholders as we can, to involve the private sector, other stakeholders, and that's the triple helix, quadruple helix approach. We want to distribute this responsibility and include as much people as possible. So this is the rationale for addressing the problem, but what are the basic economic concerns about smart specialization strategies? And this is a classical economic problem, which is basically incumbent capture and information asymmetry. So the process, as I said earlier, we want to prioritize economic activities and sector, but we as policy makers and decision makers, we possess less information about these sectors than the sectors themselves. We are not venture capitalists, we are not angel investors, we do not come from these industries, and we're expected to spend taxpayer money on prioritizing and investing in these sectors, but we don't have that access to all these information. The second main concern, we want to avoid selecting winners and maintaining the status quo. If we're good at something and then we just spend more money in that one thing that we know to do, we're just maintaining the status quo, we're not inducing structural transformation. So, but that also puts us at the risk of lobbying of the incumbents. Those established companies that have more information about their sectors, they have more incentives to lobby policy makers. So how to avoid these two basic problems, which is the lack of information, asymmetry of information, and the lobbying of the incumbent. The third main assumption is that the most important actors in the structural conformations are the new entrants, the entrepreneurs and the small firms that are coming and they're still not in the market. Those are never consulted. And they're not there and they have weak lobbying power and they're not represented. So how can we make sure we address these problems? The second aspect of our concern is that false universality of regional innovation smart specialization strategy, that it applies everywhere and it could induce that structural transformation that we want. But we also know that regions are not similar and their capacity, and we talked about their absorptive capacity, their resources on the human capital, on the institution-wise, they're completely different. So the policy mix that we want to come about to induce this structural transformation is completely different and should be tailored. And in that context, we differentiate between three different kind of regions and based on their comparative advantage. There are regions with apparent comparative advantage, there are regions with latent comparative advantage, and there are regions with unclear, undefined comparative advantage. And we, as an example, we talked yesterday about Trieste and its industries, and then we talked about the lady from Serbia, from the eastern part of Serbia, and where there is not apparent specialization. So here is just a simplified typology of the different regions as it relates to the convenience of adopting targeted strategies. So there are regions with fully apparent comparative advantage, and the policy mix to be introduced is related to either sustaining that comparative advantage, and that's allowing the R&D or inducing more R&D and skills to sustaining, or kind of the industries are declining, they're not globally competitive anymore, so how can we induce that competitiveness and enhance it? And that's, talking again about Trieste, the coffee, the shipbuilding, it's kind of apparent to talk to anybody that there are these apparent comparative advantages of the region. What to do about them, that's related to the availability of information. The second kind of region is the latent comparative advantage, and that's also the availability of information is not that clear, but we do know from the assets of this region, from the non-movable assets, from the culture of the region. There are, to make it more easy, we'll take the example of the wine industry in Chile or the soybeans in Brazil. These are kind of unleashing of the comparative advantage due to enhancing and adding more information and better aligning R&D and inducing that structural change that we need. And then we have the regions with no clear comparative advantage, and our best bet is to work on these horizontal policies to improve the entry, exit, improve the market conditions, the entrepreneurial environment, the regulatory environment, rather than picking and selecting losing industries that we don't know if they're going to deal. And this is another typology that relates the availability of information to the level of risk-taking on the policymakers' level. And again, the same kind of regions with full information about the market, the demand and the supply of these industries, we have low risk as policymakers in doing mistakes in selecting winners, and then on the partial availability of information, we can maybe unleash comparative advantage by diversifying our investments and bringing up industries that did not exist. And there are high risk of where we have no information about comparative advantage, and that's where we need the enabling environment to enable entry and exit and the entrepreneurial system. But how do we counter this asymmetry of information, or how do we add? And that's where the analytical approach come in, and I will discuss it later. But other than the analytical aspect of adding more information, how to do reduce risk, one of the aspects is basically partnering with the private sector and letting the private sector make the decisions, since they know more about their industries, and maybe we can partner and to reduce that risk, and because they have the skin on in the game. That's another aspect. Now, on the implementation side, and although the title says the challenge of implementation, we really don't see implementation as a separate phase from the design process. And that doesn't apply only for the research and innovation smart specialization. I think that applies to all kinds of strategies. The design phase of a strategy is not separate from the implementation. And that's basically avoiding the linear approach of analysis, design, implementation. The analogy is the R&D process is like invention, tech transfer, innovation. That's what we used to believe in the 50s and the 60s. Put money in the lab and then you'll get products. Obviously it doesn't work. So the same thing for smart specialization. It's not a linear approach. It's a process that includes a lot of feedback loops. It includes a lot of correction. It's adaptable, it's flexible, or it's supposed to be. But how to do this? This is a very challenging process, and that's an area where we can benefit from a lot of innovation. Since it's an innovation strategy, the strategy itself could need some innovation. And I can give an example, like our institution and the World Bank, they always experiment in new aspects of lending with the clients. And examples are like the adaptable program lending, the learning and innovation loans, and those are kind of not conditional loans, but those are based on results-based aspects. So we work with the client on setting intermediate goals. When they are met, there are monies that are dispersed. So there are ways that we can be more creative rather than dealing with it ex ante and allocating amount of money, and the risks are high of doing mistakes. The second main point of flexibility and adaptability is also, we beat this topic to death, but it's the full integration of monitoring and evaluation. And that's a very important point, because we started by just paying lip service to it. It was like, let's include some indices and material, but no, it's related to the flexibility and adaptability of the design and the implementation. So setting these intermediate goals and going about them and doing the corrective aspect, not only as program based, and if you don't meet the objectives, then the program is cancelled or the funding is cancelled. It's more of a diagnostic monitoring approach, and that's the term I'm borrowing from Evgeny Kuznetsov, who's one of our colleagues. But it's basically a problem solving, not a punishment and reward monitoring. So it's not backward looking, but diagnostic and solutions as you go. So having that flexibility, it's easy to talk about it in theory, but implementation is a very challenging aspect, and that's learning by doing, actually. And the third point is the strategic piloting and sound governance. And in the strategic piloting, that's also a term I'm borrowing from Evgeny, but it's basically his term is going inch deeper rather than mile long. So building that portfolio of strategic pilots rather than picking very few heavy investments that you can go to. And having that strategic portfolio of projects allows you to sunset some projects that have proved to be unyielding and then moving ahead with other projects. Sound governance, also needless to say, sound governance and enforcement of proper management and ensuring transparency and public consultation of policies. That also helps a lot in the implementation. And again, linking back implementation to the design process, the process of designing the strategy helps us in two very important things, is in building the network with the private sector actors, with other stakeholders that will help us on the implementation side. The other aspect is building capacity of these public institutions and the public servants on what and how and when. That's through the design phase, and that will help us through the implementation. I think I've taken a lot of time. I'm going to jump to our project experiences. I'm going to highlight three basic experiences that are relevant. One is in Romania, the other in Croatia, and the third is recently in Poland. And our Romania experience basically highlights the usage of competitive assessments as an analytical tool to increase the information, and applying the same kind of framework I discussed earlier in dividing the typology of comparative advantage using the collected information. And by competitive assessments analytical tool, we talk about trade outcomes assessment, economic geography assessment, territorial assessment, trade and transport facilitation, and logistic infrastructure assessment. So there's several kinds of competitive assessment that will collect more information for us, and that's also not the full agenda, but that helps us a lot to make better decisions in dividing these possible specialization areas into the different categories as apparent, latent, or unclear. And then we come to the policy area and intervention, and devising these tailored policy mixes, whether on the horizontal level for the ecosystem or on the vertical level as per the sector. One of the main lessons that we learned from the Romania experience, which is also intuitive, is that successful implementation mainly depends on improving the institutional framework. And the main issue was the cooperation between the regional and the national government on the implementation and the design side, and bridging. So one of the main aspects that's related to also to unleashing the comparative advantage is linking science to industry, having availability to access to finance, the entry and exit of firms, and the entrepreneurial environment in general. The second experience is our experience in Croatia, and I brought some copies of the report, and it's available in soft copy. Actually, I might get a promotion if all of you download it, because it's my manager, so I can tell him. But I have only 4. I'm joking, actually. So the Croatia experience is a good example of unleashing the latent comparative example. That's where we also used the trade competitive assessment and the economic geography assessment. It was basically 4 different pieces of analytical work that are in the report, and then there were suggested cases of potential areas of comparative advantage, and where we identified trends and challenges and niche areas in basically 5 industries: clean energy, the oysters, and biotech and pharma. And the 2 main lessons that were taken away basically from the Croatia experience is the market environment and dynamics, and that's on the horizontal level. It's very basic, but it makes a lot of difference. It's simplifying regulatory environment, easing the entry and exit, supporting SME R&D, and strengthening the governance of innovation and innovation policy. And on the innovation policy it's basically not more money, but better ways of spending money and allocation. The most recent experience in Poland, and that's a little bit different because it's not only on the analytical competitive assessment side, but that's the first implementation of what is called the entrepreneurial discovery process, EDP. And that's basically a very costly approach, but that's where you can actually increase as much information available to you as possible. And that's through smart interviews and smart labs and innovation maps. And I know I'm running off time, but this is a very interesting approach. There were more than 500 firm-level interviews that collected as much information as possible, and then it devised interventions, and they defined sleeping beauty and high-growth potential firms that could be the drivers of that specialization. Finally, I'm going to leave you with just 3 main takeaways from this presentation. Basically, your main risk is related to maximizing and leveraging available information. If they're not available, how to get them through the analytical work, through the EDP process. And you can reduce risk by also working with the private sector. They are the ones who know most about their industries, so reaching out to as much possible firms, the young ones and SMEs and large firms, to get more information. And when in doubt, basically your best bet is not selecting, is working on that horizontal policy aspect, the entrepreneurial environment. The second point is what I've discussed in the implementation challenge, the adaptability, experimentation, and piloting to avoid expensive mistakes rather than going deep, cutting short, and realigning. And the last point is focusing on the governance and the process. Again, design is not separated from implementation, focusing on the process, learning through the process, putting the right feedback loops to correct and adapt as you go could save you a lot of mistakes. Finally, I would like to say that we, as I said, the bank is not new to this topic, and we're more than happy to work on this topic, whether on the regional level or on the country base, and I'm more than happy to discuss and answer questions after. Again, I have some copies of the book if anybody wants. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, Anwar. We move immediately to Professor Roko Andricevic, who is a professor at the University of Split in Croatia, and he will expand further. So this first example, reference to Croatia, will be very much expanded in his presentation on Wice and S3 in Croatia. Professor, please.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot for introduction. I'm going to try to cover up some missing time for the longer presentation that we heard right now to be on schedule, especially since I already spoke yesterday something about innovations and the general issue. Let me first find my short presentation that I have. Okay, basically if you remember, I showed you same slide yesterday when I was discussing predominantly about innovation strategy and the issues about that concept that Croatia released just recently. Today I will put more emphasis on these last 2 items: smart specialization strategy that was released, as you can see, this year, and the Western Balkans Research and Innovation Center, Wice. We heard a lot of guidances for structuring S3, and most countries in the region and most countries in the European Union follow those guidances, prioritizing industry, somehow finding middle grounds between the research community, academia, and industry. But what happens if you have a country where there is no industry? Then there is nothing to meet with. Or if you have very weak industry, or if you have a situation that that country within the borderlines does not have that matching potential, that when you read the guidances, they look very nice on the paper, and when they're applied on bigger scale, they fully match the issues, how to develop, how to release such strategy. Analytical approach is very clear. We are trying to find competitive clusters with science and technology areas, try to match them together and so on. But at the end, what is, for example, in Croatia's case, we ended up with five thematic areas, as you can see here, and we also have some cross-cutting themes, key enabling technology and ICT. On the paper looks everything nice, and Yesterday I was telling you about innovation strategy as well in many countries, how they look nice when they read the sentences, when you read the concept. So this is what happens with most of the S3 already developed in this region when we are talking about that. But then suddenly we find the problems. Where are the problems? The problems are, first of all, can we deliver all these instruments for the policy mix? That is extremely important when we talk about implementation of S3 in the future. Can we deliver all these policies? Because they are a combination of the governmental role, public role, local governmental role, and so on. That's the question. And at the end, you end up with the challenges and obstacles. Yesterday, I showed you, when we talk about innovation strategy, those key challenges that are facing innovation strategy. These are the ones that are facing implementation of the S3. Inadequate, underdeveloped research infrastructure and equipment. I'm talking for Croatia, and I'm sure that this can be related to many other countries in the region. Relatively weak R&D capacities of the business sector and low number of laboratories with up-to-date equipment for the implementation projects with a technological orientation. In Croatia, only around 0.19% workers work on R&D activities in private sector. So when we talk about meeting academia with private sector, we know each other by the name. What might be the solution? The solution is something, in my opinion, my personal opinion, is something that we call upscaling. In this conference, the theme is macro-regional strategies, macro-regional initiatives, macro-regional activities that are happening in last, let's say, 5, 6, and even more years, depending on which macro-region we are talking about. When you talk about Baltics, we know they are happening already maybe 15, 20 years. Adriatic Ionian as an initiative started also 15 years ago. Danube strategy, a relatively new one, maybe advanced even more, showed how important it is to look at the macro-regional scale. So all of these obstacles and challenges, if you look at the map and if you expand the scale of the region, some of these obstacles are dropping out. That's called upscaling of the strategies. So I'm not talking that we have to go up to the macro region of the Southeast Europe, but maybe that's one option. I heard recently in Vienna on one conference, somebody's talking maybe going to EU scale. Yesterday I showed you statistics of very recent statistics that Europe is still 30% below US expenditures for R&D and even 60% below the Far East. These are the facts. And I'm going to show you also some challenges that are currently happening in Europe. We have current innovation-friendly climate. We see all these innovation ecosystem concepts, innovation community concepts and so forth, but has a tendency that we always take a certain success stories and champion those success stories which are based on research-based innovation. Obviously they are, and we all know examples of those success stories. But there is a questionable social benefit, and this is something that we touched upon yesterday with Professor Veskovic on the session dealing with social innovation, why it is not included in many of our strategies. Not only in this region, but even in some member states of the European Union. Questionable social benefit with the value of the taxpayer, long-term viability, and impact on research system. We heard before, and I mentioned yesterday as well, innovation is not a linear process, and we have to be realistic in that. And this is a quote from the Science Europe Engineering Committee of last year, which they are specifically saying that research-based innovation in Europe does not meet the expectation of society and of political and economic leaders. We have to be realistic in that, regardless of those success stories that we all have it in our hands. So this is something, and I'll show again this slide I showed yesterday. The result of that is this. When you look at the patents, 50% of those come from the United States, 20% comes from Japan, and Europe is on 15%. And we have 500 million people living in this European Union. Let's face it, that. This is not solution, but this is one initiative that also was regionally based. Essentially started 2009 on in Sarajevo with the help of the World Bank. The World Bank was involved in that from the very beginning, especially Paolo Correa. You mentioned him on your presentation, so yeah, your boss, I know. So they've been supporting this idea. Later on, European Commission came in, especially RCC as well, who helped develop basically two strategies, one RCC and one World Bank, on the research and innovation for this Western Balkan region. Many people always ask me why Wice, and Wice that has nothing to do with the abbreviation from this title here, as you can see, but at the very beginning, the initiative was called Western Balkan Innovation, Science and Education. And somehow we kept that initial phrase, and that's how WISE is acronym for this initiative. It was, the work and activities lasted from 2011 to 2015, and we managed to have a WISE agreement duly signed by all the countries listed here. So we are talking about 7 countries in this particular concept. The slide that I also showed you yesterday, because from the innovation standpoint, I want to a little bit more explain here. The WISE is considered to be a international institution that will be focused on 4 pillars. Research Excellence Fund will be created, regional networks of excellence, technology transfer program, and early stage startup program. The results of this concept was based on the analysis and analytics done through the different outcomes from those 2 strategies, one from the World Bank, the other one from RCC, strategy for innovation for this particular region. The WISE Center will be located in the city of Split in Croatia, and it will be covering these 7 countries with the, as you can see here, with the scope of work and actually activities they will promote and facilitate within this region. We can call it also the macro region in one case, even though the scale compared to other macro regions is not that great, but still is trying to merge all these countries together in some boost-up ideas for developing more investment in R&D, and also to collaboration issue that I was talking yesterday. Fact that all these countries are neighboring to each other may help this collaboration to be more on the physical basis, as I said yesterday, not only through emails and through phones, but also to have some physical contact between the researchers, between the SMEs in the region, because, as I said yesterday, most of these countries, when you look at the statistics, 90+% of the private sector is within the SMEs. And this is why this should be a focus also on these macro-regional strategies, somehow to focus on those SMEs. Probably you will ask how this will be financed. The countries in the region will finance the operational cost of the center, and donation is coming from different countries, focusing on different research areas of their interest. Will help all the World Bank, and will help with the help of the European Commission as well. So this is a structure, and just recently, I think a couple of weeks ago in the city of Split was the final meeting that announced that 4 countries out of 7 ratified agreement within their parliaments, and therefore the agreement can be put in place. And right now they are preparing a home country agreement between Croatia, Republic of Croatia, and the WISE as an international independent non-profit, as you can see, organization. And I'm anticipating in the spring of 2017, everything will be launched on the ground. This is part of my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. You didn't recover so much time, but you were on time. So thank you very much for your effort anyway. And we are becoming more and more involved with the reality. We now go into the macro-regional reality with Desiree Percatz, who has hands-on experience in terms of the Danube Inconet, and will tell us what they've been doing in terms of getting S3 into the macro-regional strategy and making it work, doing this upscaling, which has been mentioned, which is a very interesting concept in terms of overcoming regional obstacles, going one way further. And this, I think, would merit even a more detailed presentation, because this, I think, is a very interesting concept for us. Thank you. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Is it working? Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to present the activities we are carrying out in order to support innovation, research and innovation in the wide Danube area. I would like to start by introducing and mentioning the heterogeneity of this area. We are talking about an area covering 1/5 of the EU territory, including 14 countries, which are either EU member states, associated countries, or neighborhood countries, for a total of more than 100 million inhabitants. The region is a region of contradiction. Heterogeneity depends, of course, and is linked with disparities, differences, but also relates with a huge potential and unexploited potential in terms of both economic development and innovation uptake. The region is a region of contradiction. On the western side of it, we can find the two German regions, the Länder, Baden-Württemberg and Bavaria, which are among the most developed region in Europe and in the world, I would say. On the other side, we have other countries that have a huge amount of pitfalls to overcome in order to allow economic development, innovation, and embark in innovation potential. So countries, generally speaking, are not reaching adequate levels in research and development spending. The average at regional level, Danube regional level, is 1.4% of GDP spent in research and development, whilst the EU 27 average is 2.7. The two German regions represent half of the entire regional GDP, while the EU member states belonging to the Danube region represent almost 90% of the share in the regional GDP. Other challenges to be overcome are underdeveloped entrepreneurial culture, brain drain phenomenon, low salaries, inadequate infrastructures that hinder, of course, the competitiveness and innovation of the area. As far as the policy framework is concerned, you heard we are talking about EU member states, non-EU member states. All the countries can participate in Horizon 2020. Representatives are involved in ERA, advisory bodies, program committees. There are also activities, actions under Horizon 2020. So to say, the policy support facility that allows countries to reform research and innovation systems, and other widening and spreading excellence activities that address research and development. The enlargement process is ongoing, with Montenegro and Serbia already negotiating the acquis communautaire chapters, and there is regional cooperation at the Western Balkan levels, of course, and European neighborhood policy ongoing. The project is is developed within the macro-regional strategy targeting the Danube region. The Danube region is anyway also concerned, interested by the Adriatic Union, and there are other transnational cooperation programs like Interreg and policy learning platforms exercises for ongoing. Danube Connect, the project that I represent today, understand itself has high-level strategic coordination support action. It covers the whole Danube region through 19 partners. We provide support to the EU strategy for the Danube region, and in particular to its priorities 7, knowledge, society, and competitiveness, PA8. We started our work in January 2014, have been funded for a total amount of 2 million euro, sorry. And we will end our activities in June. It would be nice. It would have been nice. In June 2017. Our partners provide support to the policy dialogue within the European Danube strategies indeed. We provide links with other regional strategies. We extend by-regional dialogue in the framework of the European Research Area and Innovation Union. The partners also have committed to coordinate, to find innovative coordination ways of funding mechanism. We address specifically one of the most important challenges in the region, that is to say energy and bioeconomy, while providing networking to the most relevant stakeholders and funding pilot action in this framework. As far as the analytical work we are developing, our objective is to provide analytical evidence to R&D policymakers through studies, reports that you will see in next slides. Last but not least, we do provide support to innovation. We do contribute to the creation of smart specialized Danube region and to the transfer center, to technology transfer in the region. The main, so we have been working for some time now, and there are a lot of results already available and available for being exploited, further exploited. Generally speaking, the project succeed in improving coordination of R&D activities in the region. For being more specific, so in the analytical work, we have developed several reports, like for instance the co-publication and co-patenting analysis among the countries that provide a solid base for understanding, identifying thematic strengths, cooperation patterns, key players in the region. We also developed a study about cooperation barriers, and we identified barriers coming from the personal, that could be personal barriers, administrative barriers, barriers linked to the capacity of the country, to the project management skills, and so on. Relevant stakeholders in the region, about 40 were identified, deeply analyzed, in order also to present good practices, but also put forward recommendations for further synergies. There are a lot of research projects that have been funded in different funding programs that are focusing also, but not only on the Danube region, and that have produced transferable results. We have collected these results, categorized them, and made them available on our portal in order to allow for better exploitation. Regarding the energy and bioeconomy sectors, challenge sector, we have identified the most relevant stakeholders, as already said. We have involved them in networking, clustering activities. We are providing information to these stakeholders on monthly basis, and we also have funded two particularly innovative pilot actions that are able to generate results and durable results in support to the implementation of the Danube strategy. Let me just mention an important networking event we are organizing on end of November, 30th of November, regarding this sector. It will be in Bratislava. Regarding the innovation potential of the region, we do have worked a lot also here. The JRC and the S3 platform is one of the partners in the project, so they have been focusing on this task, providing design workshop, peer reviews, and developing reports on S3 strategies in the region, but also with important information. For instance, the matchmaking and information exchange report that informs on the tools advancing the collaboration in research and innovation strategies for smart specialization. According to this study, so and the data that have been collected from 13 countries and 4 regions, the analysis has revealed the 4 main fields of cooperation: knowledge enabling technology, ICT, and sustainable innovation and health. An upcoming report is shortly to be released, the S3 role in the EU enlargement neighborhood policy, and a workshop will be organized end of November, 24th and 25th of November in Vienna, that will be followed also by publication. Danube Inconet also has addressed technology transfer issues, has created and implementing technology transfer centers in the Danube region, and developed, so to say, a Danube transnational transfer center network in the area of USDR. Finally, we have also worked on the coordination of regional, national, multinational funding. One of our success story is the Eureka call that was launched for the Danube region in 2015. These are the countries that have participated. Now there are discussions for an upcoming call that will be probably launched in February 2017, but discussion is still ongoing about the number of countries that will participate in it. Danube Inconet also contributed to the discussions on the Danube Region Research and Innovation Fund. According to the feasibility study that a Danube Funding Coordination Network was launched recently in May 2016. And it aims to be and to become a sustainable structure for joint funding action based on the existing programs and instruments. Till the end of this month, so there are still some days to apply for the WTZ, the Danube Region Call. This is a multilateral call between Austria, Czech Republic, Serbia, and Slovenia that support mobility. Last but not least, one of our most important results, I would say, it's our cooperation platform that consists in both our information website and all other communication and dissemination channels, being the social media accounts, the newsletter, and the news alerts we send. The Danube Inconet portal is a knowledge hub, recognized and very appreciated as far as the RTD dynamics in the Danube region. We do provide information in terms of articles, news, event announcement, but also provide support with dedicated databases about organization and projects. And we do provide also support to stakeholders through a document and tools repository and a call database that include all funding instruments targeting higher education, research, and innovation that are available for the Danube region itself. This is the end of my presentation. I would kindly invite you to register for our newsletter, to visit our portal, to find more information about our activities, success stories, achievements, and be sure that you will appreciate the Danube in Connect newsletter as it collects all our dissemination and communication efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Desiree. I'm sure you've opened the appetite of the participants for the session that will look more into the macro region and S3 in the afternoon. This was a very interesting example of the activities that have been already carried out and are being carried out in terms of S3 cooperation across a whole macro region, and this is one of the major ones. I know we're running a little bit over time, no, quite a lot over time, and certainly impacting on your coffee time, which I'm sure is well deserved. But I will count on the tolerance of my colleagues from the JRC just to open up the floor. Is this correct, Alice? If people have any question, yes, please. There's a microphone. Yeah, if there's the lady there, please. Can you just please identify yourself?
Thank you. Morning. I'm coming from on behalf of the Bulgarian Academy of Science. First of all, to our lecturer from the World Bank, I want a copy of that book. Second thing, knowing that the World Bank is participating in quite a lot of research and funded projects in our country, knowing that the European Union has already stated a lot of different strategies and long-term objectives, what is yours in terms of, you said success, this project is a success, we have identified different mistakes. What is your final strategical goals? Because you're advising the energy sector, obviously advising the science sector in different countries in the region. Because it will be very nice to know at the end of the day what is the how to call that, the red thread in all your projects. Because I have the impression that you have a lot of serious role to play in the region. Thank you.
It's not going to be a simple answer, but...
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. There are two levels to the answer. I mean, the main objective of the World Bank, and those are the two big objectives, reducing poverty and inequality, but that's a big objective. But for each single project, we apply what I discussed about monitoring and evaluation. There's a list of indicators and intermediate goals that we look at, and we evaluate for each project. We have something called the implementation completion report, and that evaluates what the project have achieved, and we have an agency at the bank called IEG, Implementation Evaluation Group, and that does evaluation and says this project was successful or not. The third way of looking at it basically is what the countries think of that project. And sometimes we just do the analytical work and the country goes ahead and does something completely the opposite. Sometimes they do the implementation, but the government changes and reshuffle. There's a million possibilities. So it really depends on who you ask what was the success and was not. But from an objective perspective, if that country have really achieved better allocation of R&D spending, there But if you, and there's a lot of expensive mistakes too. I mean, I don't want to name countries, but there's a lot of countries that spent a lot of money on infrastructure projects, on restructuring, on establishing new agencies and new structures, and the results are not there yet, or yet to be seen, or I don't know what happened. That's why the emphasis also is on governance and transparency and best possibilities. But I mean, that's a very good question, but I don't know if I answered.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there are another one. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Leila Pojskic. I'm coming from the Academia from Bosnia and Herzegovina. My question can be addressed to all of you, but especially to Mr. Roko Andričević. I'm particularly happy about this Wice strategy and idea, and I really believe that there is a great potential
Okay.
I only had this Italian phone number which I had to push this agenda. So I called Alessandra Taranto, you remember her from Germany, who had
This is something that we are especially innovation is global trends. It's something
I was really stressed out.
I mean, for the very least, there are huge implications on the opportunities. Exactly. And people don't get the rural side is not even aware. I mean, they don't even see that it's coming. So it's also important this in terms of these opportunities that are coming in the next 20 years, I really felt it. I haven't. The French are more active on the urban side. These are.
Spieghici dove sono le cose? Ah, tutto qua.
Sotto il microfono però lo prenderò perché è tutto un po'. Cioè perché ce l'avevo qua il microfono, quindi quando ho visto che potevano esserci domande.
Sì, infatti ti ho vista perché fuori c'era lo schermo e guardavo per vedere a che punto era.
Organize myself.
So how are things in Slovenia?
Well, much better than 2 years ago, I would say. In terms of kind of optimism, stability, and trends, they are all going the right direction. And things that we try to do through innovation part are kind of very well received on the private sector side. That gives me optimism. So it's not that we're working on, kind of promoting R&D as such, but we are working hand in hand with the private sector. You'll see what we're doing now, because it's kind of a clustering exercise, but it's a bit
More of a platform, clustering that's sort of...
It's basically clusters, but we try to, kind of use it really as a platform to work hand in hand, government with the private sector and the research. And, we came a long way.
That's also something we see in other countries, is this kind of transition from traditional clusters that were more focused on the network of the companies there, but more as platforms also for startups and hackathons and linking young people. Okay, good, Peter. I'm going to go get a...
Yeah, please do, so that you'll be fresh and you'll get all the open mind.
All the cross-border transnational is for sovereignty. But you can blame this guy because he's from a member state.
No, but it's his fault because he didn't allow it to.
We're back to this kind of typical European blame. You blame the other policy. This is why we.
It was all Eduardo's fault.
This is why we always stuck.
When he says when he's attacked, he says it. Anyway, this was a very interesting issue, which is the fact that we don't put our money where our mouth is. So it's anything that is not national or regional allocations is minimized by default.
Because of the member states.
We built mechanisms and political ambitions on something else which has no money. And this is...
Well, but then there's also a problem of ownership, I mean, somehow these kind of macro-regional stakeholders do not, take the ownership of the activities of collaboration and all that. It simply doesn't happen.
Well, let's put it this way as well. If they were all very good, I think it would happen. The fact is, you have very weak actors there, which they're not even capable to put their own house in order. I mean, how do you expect regions to collaborate within a macro-regional strategy when they are unable to establish their own institutions?
Of course. There's also an issue of capacity building. You know, they simply you have countries that are not that are not able even to govern within their self or their regions and so on. And it's a problem actually. I think that if there would be some additional money on the table, maybe it would be a bit easier. No? We are trying to push. You know, JRC. You know that, for example, for the Danube, JRC already for quite a few years it's supporting the Danube macro-regional studies since 2013 actually. So, but and on the other hand, the Baltics is working quite okay, luckily, because they have this kind of traditional cooperation, you know, from the Nordic.
mislim, kao uvod. Svako ima neku minutažu i kao što sam zemlja stvari, u principu ti poslao bio nekakva pitanja, mislim, ti možeš i ono što si htio eventualno juče, ali recimo ovo bi bilo, mislim, ovo su benefiti transnacionalne saradnje. Ne znam da li sam ti ovo. Ne, ja sam tebi bio poslao za ono jučerašnje. Da, ovo su sve što se tiče toga. Prema tome, eventualno, znači, na ove stvari da probaš da, ali te ja neću, ti ćeš mi reći u kom smeru da te provocira prosto. Ništa, čuvaj mi sad samo ovo mi je jedini primjer ako
Mr. Smart Specialization of Slovenia. This is Mr. Smart Specialization of Austria. In a way. Yes, well, I will tell it's connected to this executive functionality which is done on the national level. Well, yes and no. 15, we say 15 minutes. I'll try to be as brief as possible.
Buongiorno, come sta?
Yeah, kind of a little bit of traffic.
That's why I started in the morning because wait
I will.
Anyway, try to be short. I will kind of give you some signals.
Don't worry.
And hello. Nice to meet you. Yeah. So, good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats because we shall start. I was informed that there are actually more people than seats. So, and unfortunately for security reasons, we are not allowed to have actually more seats in the room. But there is actually a projection outside. So those of you, it is another room with a projection. So maybe those of you who don't manage to, but there's still some seats around. Huh? So. Yeah, well, there's for the time being. I mean, there's still place. So, yeah. Yeah. There's actually somebody take off my presentation. Very nice. Anyway, I'll do a little bit of introduction and then we'll go as it was planned. But I before uploaded the presentation and it's not there now, so I should take care of being here. So let's do it directly from the... Okay. So, this is it. So, good morning again from my side. I will introduce a little bit the session on smart stories, the smart specialization from design to implementation. This is just a very short introduction, and later we will go to 4 distinguished speakers from actually, well, from five different countries in the region. So our colleague from Italy, from the region we are in, then from Slovenia, from Austria, from Croatia, and from Serbia. So you will get a nice overview of what has been going on with regard to the smart specialization in this macro region. So firstly, a little bit on the smart specialization. You have seen already some slides and some information that was given by our colleague from the World Bank. But I'm not sure actually whether all of you have a really clear idea on what is the concept of smart specialization. So I'll share a few slides with you just to somehow stress the importance of this different mindset, let's say. So it's really a smart specialization represents a fundamental mind shift in territorial development policies, and it's actually economic restructuring. It's a new participatory way of industrial policy. So it has a lot of different kind of aspirations, but in principle it is actually, we need to distinguish in between the overall smart specialization policy concept and in between the smart specialization strategy, so the research and innovation strategies for smart specialization. The concept has been actually introduced actually by the Slovenian research commissioner, so the research commissioner Potočnik, 2 commissions back. And he had actually a group of experts called Knowledge for Growth. And this has been actually a concept that has been considered within the research policy first. But then the problem was, of course, that research policy is in the domain of the member states. So the Commission didn't have a lot of influence there, and it would be very difficult. So the idea somehow managed to enter into the cohesion policy concept because there is, the powers of the Commission are much bigger there. So from the policy concept view, it actually promotes inclusive and sustainable growth. It promotes the transparency, the participatory process, and a very important thing is that it's a place-based policy. So it valorizes existing assets and local specificities, and it mobilizes actually local economic players as the main actors of economic change. It's actually, of course, based on a selection of very few economic activities. It always creates, it's not a neutral policy actually. It always creates some tensions, because if you prioritize something, you have to deprioritize something. So, which means that you are immediately, clashing with some stakeholders. And with regard to the smart specialization strategy, these are actually national, regional agenda for economic transformation, and they coordinate financial and entrepreneurial resources to support the selected economic activities. And it's very important to define well the governance, policy mix, and also monitoring mechanism that should be, as it was said before by our colleague Amber from World Bank, should be integrated from the start. Of course, there is a practical issue that in some cases it's actually not possible to do it right from the start because of a lot of problems. So it's a fact-based. It's based on a very dynamic entrepreneurial discovery process. Of course, it's very important that it actually includes all forms of innovation. So not only technology-driven innovation, not only high-tech innovation, but also service innovation, process innovation, social innovation, and so on. So it is very, very important. This tends to be overlooked in a way by many people, many stakeholders that are actually, or many countries and regions that are actually doing it. It's an ecosystem approach which is creating an environment for change, and it's actually affecting a lot the efficiency of institutions. And with regard to specialization, it's not always so much about specialization, it's also about differentiation. So our colleague from Croatia was actually mentioning also this. It's very important to differentiate, not only specialize. You first differentiate, then you can agree what to specialize on. There's of course, very important concentration of resources because, if you spread the money thinly, where we say it in Spanish, café para todos, no? In this way, it doesn't work. So if you give everybody a little something, then you will never excel, because there are always some people that are better in some regions and countries that are better in doing that. So you need to really kind of focus and concentrate resources in order to into something where you can excel, and then you can make a breakthrough. No? And it's also very important, this is place-based transformation. So it also needs to kind of rejuvenate traditional sectors through higher value activities. It needs to follow the value chain. So you need to position yourself, your region, your country, in the European and global value chains in order to see where to continue. A little bit about the ERDF resources, about the ESIF, so European Structure Funds, Investment Structure Funds. It's actually, it has been agreed that in 2014-2020 there will be concentration of ERDF resources to maximize impact. And actually for the developed regions and transition regions, practically 80% of resources should be devoted to research and innovation, SMEs competitiveness, and also energy efficiency and renewable energy, which is more or less low carbon targets. And for the less developed regions, it's about 50%, no, that they need to concentrate. And this actually altogether is quite important because it actually ends up to more than 110 billion ESIF money for innovation. So it has been actually bolstering over 120 regional national smart specialization strategies in the EU. So this is the sum up of regional ones plus national ones. Actually, you would know that the European Commission did not mess too much with the level where countries wanted to establish. So either national or regional. Actually, originally it was meant that it's going to be just regional ones. But then it quickly turned out that the majority of the member states did it the national one. So there are around 18, 19 national strategies and only 9 regional ones. So this is also, I mean, how it is, and that's why you get up to 120. Smart specialization also, there's a polyphacetic concept in a way. It is, of course, ex-ante conditionality for the release of the ERDF resources on thematic objective 1, which is just one of the many objectives. It's on research and innovation and is directly linked to about 40 billion euros in the financial period 2014-2020. But of course, it indirectly covers the other 3 thematic objectives, which goes up to 110 billion euros then. And when it was done actually right, it would actually affect all the thematic objectives. And we have tried to reach that. Peter might remember that, even with Slovenia, because we were involved in the assessment of strategies and so on, and we were trying to reach the stage where the countries would actually consider smart specialization as a kind of mother of all the strategies in order to actually comprise all the activities that have whatsoever relation to the research and innovation. And if this is done this way, this is really, really perfect. It's also, of course, smart specialization is also leveraged for additional funding, national, regional, public-private partnership, supporting identified S3 value chains in the countries and regions. And with this, actually, it mobilizes up to 6 times more money in the EU. It's also a trigger for change in innovation policies and in overall transparency and participatory policy making. Actually, it's changed fundamentally the policy making, the policy mix, the governance and so on in the countries and regions who have done it properly at least. And it's also quite an influential pattern for other public investments. So it's actually penetrating more and more into other EU policies. I mentioned before other thematic objectives, but also value chains, and it has been mentioned before here. We are now moving also into very specific thematic smart specialization platforms, which are kind of supporting the stakeholders in the areas like energy, like industrial modernization, like agri-food, and there will be more. So, and last but not least, and that's also why you are here, in a way, there's increasing interest in smart specialization concept in EU enlargement policies. So actually Western Balkan countries with Serbia, Montenegro and so on, Macedonia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, these countries are probably somewhere in the next waves of enlargement, and it's quite an important influential pattern for these countries also. And actually, well, smart specialization towards cross-cutting policy paradigm, we'll see. We are getting there. We're also discussing now, and it will be a topic of another session of the macro-regional smart specialization, or we'll see what will happen there, some kind of umbrella smart specialization strategy for the macro-regional EU strategies. We'll see. It's interesting thing here, actually a colleague from World Bank, Mr. Kuznetsov was mentioned before by our World Bank colleague. So he actually stated that the smart specialization program of the European Commission is currently the biggest experiment in innovation and industrial policy in the world, and possibly the biggest ever undertaken. So really kind of a huge impact of smart specialization. So it has been mentioned briefly before that most EU regions and countries have already started implementing the smart specialization strategies. So it was discovered actually we are directly, our platform is directly involved in these processes. We are trying to support the stakeholders. So the strategies were generally stronger at analysis in the first steps, let's say, so to say, and they are weaker at monitoring and evaluation and in this kind of feedback loop into the strategies. You might know that actually it was foreseen from the start that in the midterm there will be assessment and there will be change to kind of there will be an opportunity to change, to modify the strategies according with the entrepreneurial discovery process, with the new discoveries that will happen in the meantime. So it will happen late 2017, 2018. And what is also what we also observed is that some smart specialization principles are sometimes not fully taken on board in the prioritization process. So this was also a problem, and sometimes also the involvement of stakeholders was rather limited, was kind of only in the start and so on, and then later they were kind of left out. And also the quadruple helix governance, so the civil society is not having the right role that it should have. There are still quite a few challenges ahead. I mentioned briefly before the EU enlargement and neighborhood countries. So the smart specialization concept is actually getting slowly into the strategic documents of enlargement policies of EU. But it's still, I mean, it's still getting there slowly. So the progress is still to be noticed. This kind of bottom-up component of strategy is really important. So the countries used to be and regions used to work really kind of top-down, and this is completely overhauling their principles. So it's still there's still some things to do there. And actually also to operationalize the continuous process of entrepreneurial discovery in different contexts, of course, regional, national, and so on, is still a huge issue. And also to somehow avoid the capture of lobbying of closed clubs of some very important stakeholders. Just one or two words on the smart specialization platform where I'm coming from. We have actually very wide membership. We have 177 EU regions and 20 countries there. We have actually also a few non-EU regions, and there is a call here in this place also towards the countries that we have presence here. So from the Balkans, Western Balkan countries, they can also register. We have, for example, Serbia registered, we have Moldova registered. Ukraine has recently signaled that they want to enter, but there's still also the space, of course, for Albania, Montenegro, Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and so on. So this is quite an important first step, because you immediately get information, you see what others are doing, you get into this kind of circle, and then it's much easier to move around with your activities. There's also a strong endorsement. I mean, we always run the satisfaction, questionnaires on satisfaction rankings in our events, and we always have very high ranks, and actually people come again and again to our events, although we do not pay them. So it's not the case that we would pay people from different region countries to come to our events. They pay for themselves. We, of course, sometimes do the exceptions, like, for example, today, that a lot of experts from different countries are actually paid to come, but this is not normally the case. And also we have very strong political endorsement by European Commission, by different commissioners, by European Parliament, by Council, and also by Committee of the Region. We do really a lot of different things, so I will not go into detail here. We do analysis, we do policy briefs. We actually made the guide, the RIS3 guide itself, together with some experts, with some academicians. And we also do a lot of policy briefs, so I brought one dealing with the Danube there, a couple of copies, but all the policy briefs are actually available on our website for downloading. And we also do a very different variety of events, so transnational learning, peer review events, thematic workshops, and so on. We really actively support the 4 macro-regional strategies, especially the Danube one and also the Baltic Sea region one. We are entering also now in the support of the Adriatic, Ionian, and Alpine macro-region. We developed a bunch of tools which are all available online. They are quite interesting, but of course you need to realize that they are basically covering the EU. because our mandate was actually with DG Regio and was basically to support the EU member states and regions. So of course we will with time somehow extend the tools, but mostly they are for now covering just the member states. But you can still maybe identify some regions that are similar to you and then see what they are doing, what are their priorities and so on. We also captured actually the priorities of smart specialization of all the regions. This is this IA33 tool. And we actually there also add up the priorities from some research strategies from the other countries. So we have their coverage of Western Balkan countries, also of Ukraine, of Moldova, and so on. But of course, these are not directly comparable because they have completely different kind of background than smart specialization. So just a few words on the Danube macro-regional cooperation. I mentioned that we are very actively working on this. We had actually among the 60 peer-reviewed regions and 15 member states, 8 were from the Danube, 8 regions and 7 member states. So also we have registered Serbia and Moldova, which are the non-EU countries from the macro region, from the Danube macro region. So we are open to others, as I said. And this is just to tell that we have actually systematically been working since 2013 on the Danube, on smart specialization for Danube through different seminars, workshops, and so on. And we are also organizing every year high-level event of the JRC scientific support to the Danube strategy, which will be actually this year within the EU SDR annual forum in Bratislava, whereas the past years it was back-to-back with the annual forum. I mentioned a couple of policy briefs. So upcoming one was actually mentioned. It's also smart specialization in macro-regional dimension, mapping research and innovation priorities in the Danube region, and there will be another one on the importance or role of the smart specialization in the enlargement and the neighborhood countries. We are, of course, trying to work towards alignment of research and innovation priorities from smart specialization strategies, and we are working towards the Danube macro-regional smart specialization strategy. And actually today, we will try to actually, through different sessions, we'll try to actually discuss a little bit the possibilities, or your views also will be, of course, welcome to do this. So this is from my side. Thank you very much, and I would just directly announce our next speaker, which is actually our colleague from Austria, Armin Mar. He's from Federal Ministry of Science, Research and Economics, and he was actually very close involved with the smart specialization in Austria. So the floor is yours, please.
That one, huh? That one, yes. We're getting there. Oops. Okay, good morning from my side. Well, is smart specialization cutting across policy silos? I would say hopefully yes. And if it does so, what politicians and policymakers still need is a reference model to make policies more tangible. And that's, I think, part of the answer of why we saw a renaissance of place-based models like smart specialization over the last years. Well, I was asked to contribute a smart story. I'm not sure whether our dealing with the smart specialization strategy in Austria was a smart story, but I will briefly introduce you on how we did it. And then I hope to add something that at least an experts group of the European Commission nominated as a smart policy scheme, and that's called the Lead Institutions Initiative. I'm a policymaker, and I would like to bring in knowledge institutions into the discussion of smart specialization, because to my opinion, there can't be any kind of smart specialization if you leave out knowledge institutions in your region. So, yeah, briefly about our history in cooperation. We've been among the early partners of the European Commission and the Joint Research Center in Seville in the case of smart specialization. And together with Flanders, and I see Jan Laros sitting here in the back, and with Finland together, we've been the initiators of the OECD Smart Specialization project that had among its tasks also to be helpful to the European Commission to ground together with the Smart Specialization platform in Seville, to ground the scientific concepts and make it usable and ready for implementation. And one of the outcomes of this OECD project was a little brochure that was meant as an easy starting point and self-assessment tool to all triple helix sectors, the government sector, the knowledge sector, and the business sector. And it was meanwhile translated into 7 languages, among those also Serbian and Slovene, by regions actually. We just provided the first copy. So in terms of meeting the ex-ante conditionality in Austria, we did it with a strategic framework around the Austrian research, technology and innovation strategy. That's a strategy that originated already in 2011, before really the smart specialization concept was born. But we found that the origin, the participatory process and the evaluation culture that goes with it pretty much match what smart specialization was about. And obviously the European Commission subscribed to our idea. However, Austria is a federal country. As small as we are divided into nine states that are quite influential. And meanwhile, they all have their own STI strategy, and I would say with a growing inspiration of the concept of smart specialization. Let's put it that way. Smart specialization is not over, and talking about meeting the ex-ante conditionality, we were continuing to address this ex-ante conditionality by initiating a process called Strat-AT. We issued a partnership on smart specialization, really, that combines all stakeholders of investing ERDF money in Austria. It's a process accompanying the implementation of ERDF implementation. And we will reach a new overview of national and regional smart specializations that exist in Austria, and we should be ready by the end of this year, and there will be also an English issue of that paper. As an outlook, I would say, what did we learn so far from working with smart specialization? I think also in the context of national strategy making, we will in the future apply a growing regional sensitivity, not only in the sense of sensitivity towards the 9 Austrian regions, but by addressing regional challenges that might be alpine challenges, urban challenges, but all with a place-based connotation. And there is a lot of additional national and regional alignment going on, and we have several processes like the we call the Bundesländer Dialog, hosted by my ministry, where we invite regional players, governments and agencies for a dialogue on alignment opportunities and common projects. So as a resume for the time being, I would say, well, this ex-ante conditionality did not really suit Austria. It was not really mobilizing for Austria. For our case, small country, relative rich country, not receiving too much money out of the ERDF. So how should any region or how should the national government be persuaded to leave our quite traditional and also successful processes of strategy building and strategy implementation? If you have a strategy, a successful strategy going on since 2011, why have just 2 years later another strategy? That really is something I would like to address also in talking about the future of the framework program and European instruments. There should be a diversified approach that meets all countries. There is no one size fits all also in the implementation of and working with European instruments. What funding instruments mean to a country really depends very much on the setting in the country. Also, the Horizon 2020 has a different meaning and a different significance for every single country, and we have to look at the whole funding portfolio at the national level and match European instruments to national instruments. So thinking forward, I would say a more diversified view would be needed. But still working with smart specialization. And I would say really that Austria is committed to have a long-term relationship with the smart specialization concept. I will, oops, it's very sensitive, but now. I will not go very much into the details of the concept of smart specialization, as Alish already did, but my point of, while I still like to work with the concept, is that smart specialization is about setting credible investment priorities for a given region according to its capacities, strength, and potential. That's quite something you can communicate also to the outside world. And it helps to mobilize, and that's my point really, it helps to mobilize a multitude of players from different angles. If there is a regional connection, they share. Helping ecosystems to grow needs business partners who actually like what they find in the region. And it needs the expertise that can be found to infuse business with knowledge, technology, and the creativity that exist in the region. So I use the smart specialization concept as a reference to mobilize public universities as partners in regional innovation and in the entrepreneurial discovery process. Much has been said about the role of higher education institutions for regional innovation ecosystems. They simply have the long-term expertise for knowledge profile and the potential of the region. And they rarely move away from the region. On the contrary, they are magnets to companies and smart jobs and skills in the region. In Austria, we have the widely understood notion of lead companies for branch leaders with a particular responsibility also for the regional employers and regional developers. And in many cases, they also run a research unit. We borrowed this notion that was both that has both an empowering element and a responsible element. We borrowed this notion for universities. They are by nature lead institutions of their region. They simply need to live to it, actively include it into their strategies and communication, and join forces with companies on equal terms in shaping their regional habitat. So we therefore targeted a little policy initiative towards higher education institutions in Austria using the European smart specialization momentum. So this Lead Institutions initiative is not so much about connecting universities with their regions, as in fact there is a lot of connection already going on. However, not always in a structured pursuit of the university's own strategic planning and communication. It is therefore about activating the university's own strategic capacity to communicate their role as strong partners in a network rather than as single players. It is about developing competitive knowledge places with an international profile. From the beginning, we made quite clear that a regional mission should support international opportunities. And finally, it will be about shifting our investment focus from the purely institutional perspective to a location or ecosystem perspective, if you will, by asking institutions to help us place our scarce resources where leverage is the highest. Austria has 22 public universities situated at 8 locations throughout the country. And from the 1990s onwards, a similar number of universities of applied sciences was established, partly with a deliberate mission of regionalizing higher quality tertiary education and making applied research accessible in all 9 regions. So contrary to the public universities, you will find universities of applied sciences in all 9 regions. And I would say it's a success story that could be also interesting for other countries in the macro regions we talk about these days. The points I would like to make in this respect are that place-based activities affect research, teaching, and innovation or civic missions alike. And in all these dimensions, proximity still matters. And it creates a particular habitat for cooperation. And every institution needs to come to its own definition of proximity, at best by disregarding territorial borders. So what we asked universities to do is just draw a circle of 50 kilometers and 100 kilometers around yourself, and add all the good connections you find in this in this radius, and disregard all the borders and rivers that might separate you from your and mountains in the case of Austria that separate you from your cooperation partners. Don't look in your own territorial region only, but cross this and see what's around and with whom you can cooperate. So how are we going to about this Lead Institutions initiative? We're using 3 succeeding performance agreements and the Austrian University's development plan as a structured context with growing intensity and a shifting focus. While between 2013 to 15, the focus was on simply raising awareness among institutions who are currently promoting the use of regional higher education institution platforms for alignment and communication. So phase 1 activities, as you see it on the slide, were very much related to the smart specialization concept. And we asked universities to actively engage in the regional strategy processes. And in order to communicate their distinct profiles to the outside world, we asked for what we called location concepts. Oops. No. It's a bit, now it is here. What is a location concept? Each university has a central strategic document, its development plan. Either as part of that document or at least connected to it in a location concept, a university highlights its position within a network of strategic partners in this self-defined area of close cooperation. That could be 50, 100 kilometers I mean, it really depends on the university of the institution. It is about communicating a clustered habitat rather than a single institution, and pooling expertise and excellence towards critical mass that hopefully gets international recognition. And that's particularly in a small country like Austria, with traces of excellence here and there, but not the means of starting an excellence initiative like Germany. This is crucial, really. So what are the preliminary lessons learned from the initiative? It was upon all the 22 universities to respond or not to respond to the Lead Institutions initiative, as performance agreements are signed as strong points of intention rather than binding contracts. In phase one, it was 14 out of the 22 public universities that agreed to engage in a regional strategic dialogue and to develop a location concept, and they all did it their way. Meanwhile, there are only 3 institutions in phase 2 that are refusing any regional mission, and it's quite specialized universities of the arts that claim to be different from all others, of course. In just 2 brief examples to round up, in the case of the University of Klagenfurt, for example, that is part of the Alp and Adriatic region, the Vice Rector asked all university institutes about their key partners in the regional ecosystem, and they finally came up by defining 3 orbits. A close orbit comprising the Carinthian region and Styria, so the south of Austria. A second orbit defining the Alp and Adriatic cooperation that goes to Udine, Trieste, Ljubljana, Maribor, and so on. And finally, the global contacts as a third orbit. And in another case, it was the 4 universities of Graz, where something really remarkable happened. They used their self-organized higher education regional platform to say, well, we should just share one location, and why don't we just do one location concept together? And this really included also smaller universities that otherwise wouldn't have been part of this issue. So self-organizing and alignment in a within a region between universities and institutions, that's really key, and I would say that's a smart idea of them. So before I simply say thank you for your attention, as we are in the city of Claudia Magris, the grand writer and biographer of the Danube, let me claim that it is through Trieste that also Vienna is an Adriatic seaport, really. And it's through cities like Vienna, Bratislava, Budapest, Novi Sad, or Belgrade that Trieste is part of the Danube region, really. If you don't believe it, just read Claudio Magris, and he will tell you the story. And let me conclude by adding a ceterum censeo. It's really a shame that a couple of years ago the direct train connection between Vienna and Trieste was abolished, and you need to change trains. And Trieste used to be the old end station of the Southern Railway from Vienna. So I think it would be a really smart story. If you ask me for a macro-regional smart story, it would be a really smart story to re-establish this direct train connection, and maybe within 15 years even make it a speed connection. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, Armin, for your interesting also view on the concept of including the universities in the smart specialization concept very closely. Without further ado, I think we would invite Peter Vosner, the Government Office for Development and Cohesion Policy from Slovenia, to tell us a story on Slovenian smart specialization concept. Thank you.
Okay, and until this starts working. Super. Well, I hate being in one place, so if you don't mind, it's okay by others, I hope. I'm the smart specialization man in Government Office for Development and European Cohesion Policy, so the Slovenian government. We have been the ones who have been coordinating the whole process, and we are the ones that are now implementing the whole process, which is one of the messages that whoever has not done it yet, keep the team that was writing the damn thing also, that will make sure it starts going forward. Otherwise, there is not a chance that it would succeed. I will walk you through what we did, and I will try to demonstrate that what Slovenia did was, I would argue, certainly an example of best practice as far as smart specialization is concerned. My second objective will be to demonstrate to you or ask you to show you where we are interested in cooperating with you. And thirdly, along doing that, I will try to also shortly touch upon methodological issue, what was the value added of smart specialization. Just to say, though, that when I was listening this morning to the discussions, we were not looking so much at the barriers and the challenges. The thing that we're looking at are the opportunities, because the philosophy that we try to follow is that once we will be reaching more of the opportunities ahead, also the barriers will be falling down. And that's how I think, through small steps, you kind of build the grand story, and as long as you have the grand vision, then also the stakeholders will follow. Okay, so. Someone put this out. You, Alesh. No, I tried it before, see. Okay, so our smart specialization, what's the problem with the smart specialization? It's not, at least in our case, it wasn't hard to get knowledge institutions on board. What it's hard to get is the companies, the private sector. So the whole drive that we had from the beginning, and we presented the concept initially, so we did not go out and start talking, what do you think we should do? We came out with the concept about what we think should be done, and then talked about it with the stakeholders. And we put a strictly entrepreneurial business case of smart specialization. So we were after value added per employee, we were after change structure of the exports and about increased entrepreneurial activity. All in the global context of how to strengthen our position in the global value chains. That basically was the red line of what we're doing. And this is what we are selling about what the smart specialization is bringing, where is the change in terms of policy and the approach that as a country we are taking in terms of development. So smart specialization in Slovenia brought four things. One, we set priorities. Or I should rather say, as you will see, we are in the process of setting priorities, because I'd never, and luckily the Commission bought it at the end. It's not a one-off exercise, but it's a process. Secondly, it's about changing the consistency and the way how you do policies on the national side, and the regional and local, of course, but it starts kind of, at least in our case, for the country of our side, on the national. So bringing in consistency. Three, it's about promoting cooperation and collaboration. I think this is the key thing. It's not just about priorities, etc. That can be put on the paper, but the way how you change the behavior of the stakeholders, that's the real challenge. And fourth, it's about internationalization. And with internationalization, you will see the essence of where the flavor, the practicalities of what we are doing comes into play. Okay, so I'll drive you through all four. Now, to give you a flavor about the Slovenian economy, we do a lot of stuff. We are the 8th most diversified economy within the OECD, so we do everything. If you look at what we export and where we are good at exports, these are the kind of stuff, but the message here is that all of those, except for the pharmaceutical industry, is lagging behind the market leaders. So I won't go in the empirical part that we did, but we went through, not just through the statistical data, we went down to the firm level, and that was very important. So do not, whoever is still planning to do through this process, do not just look at the general data. All the consultants, etc., can do stuff. But it's you that have to go through you have to know about what's going on in particular companies in order to be able to be in a position to be a credible counterpart when talking to companies. Otherwise, that was one of the key things when they started taking it seriously. So basically our case was we have a good base to start on because our export structure is actually quite competitive in a number of fields. There are a number of elements where we can benefit from working from cross-fertilization from different technologies, but we need to raise the technology intensity of almost everything that we do. So these were the priorities. The industry, the third priority is the most obvious, factories of the future, health, mobility, materials as products. We also went for smart cities, communities, buildings and homes. And then we also added the second priority, which is more about things that are still to happen or we are not necessarily competitive just as yet, but there are some natural reasons why we might, if we do proper things, we could be competitive in the future, which are transition towards circular economy, food, and tourism. Now that's, if I ask you, how useful is that to you? Where do you want to cooperate with us? You will say, well, that's quite a lot of stuff. And that's exactly what the Commission said. That's too much. And that's we said, we know. But we did not want to go too far with it. Why? Because we did not know at the time how much of private sector companies are actually willing to invest of their own money. Because we need to be aware all the time that the public money that we have either from European resources or from the national public resources, is really just an icing on a cake. What you're looking at is the cake, not the icing. So we're thinking all the time, we're just using all this strategy and all the public funding just to change the behavior and the quality of the investment that actually the private sector is doing. So that's why we said at the time when we were approving this strategy, we did not want to go too far, because the companies did say what they intend or whether they're willing to follow this direction, or rather, where we are jointly want to go forward directly in these priority fields. But we were not sure whether they were just saying it. We were not sure whether they're actually willing to invest. So that's why I'm saying prioritization is a process. And that's why there is a clear link between priorities and the way how you set up working together with the stakeholders. And I'll show you how we did about that. Just to say what we're offering on the public side, and I won't dwell on that a lot, but something that was really, we addressed the things that people really were angry about the country, the state, the government. Because they were saying that the policy might even have sense in certain cases, but it was inconsistent in terms of how it was support structure through different technology readiness levels, through time, for projects. So the policy mix that was out there was not consistent. And it was certainly not consistent through time. And secondly, it was not comprehensive. We had a scheme of this kind, which was fine, scheme of that kind, but we never looked at the whole picture. So this is something that we want to address through smart specialization. And that is, you will see, directly related to institutions. Because it does not happen just by writing it on the paper. You have to go, to the last detail of public calls in order to make sure that there are synergies between what different ministries are doing. So what we're looking at basically is on the financial side, the RTDI policy, human resources and entrepreneurship. This includes also the support environment for entrepreneurship, for innovation. This includes foreign investment attraction, etc., etc., etc. But it also includes non-financial part, which is economic diplomacy, which is about the education, what is going on within the educational system. Interesting to know, just one suggestion, if you want to attract the private sector, offer them that you will work with them what's going on within the educational system, because that's what, human resources are primary concern, at least in Slovenia. So So this is what we're offering. We're saying, go with us, and we will adapt. We will work with you, government, in order to make sure that we and you together make it, stronger on the global market. We position ourselves there. Now, how do we do that? The key thing, and we're just now just before the launch of this process, we will set up strategic research and innovation partnerships, which are bringing together companies, and I'm mentioning this as number one because their voice in the decision-making will be predominant, jointly with research organizations, knowledge institutions, and the state. And I would better say also the users and also the civil society. Your slide was better, but the idea is there. It's the triple, quadruple, it's the helix. But the point here is that we want to create institutions with which the government, so we want to connect companies among each other. We want to connect companies amongst each other with the knowledge institutions, and we want to connect all of them to work together with the state in order to create a partnership, which is not a public-private partnership in a classical sense, but working together in order to strengthen our position in the global value chains through the provision of the comprehensive support environment. And that cannot be done on a horizontal basis because each priority, each segment, each market is different, and there are different things that you need to do, and different types of factors will connect, etc. So you need to differentiate. You need to make a tailored response for each of the priorities. Now that's where things become more interesting, because once you start talking on that level, then you are also able to go on a more detailed level what your priorities really are. Now this is something that will come out in the next couple of months, and this is the level where you and our stakeholders will start talking much more directly. And this will not be my phone that you will be after. You will be after, for example, Aleš Hančić right there at the back. We'll be talking later on. He's one of the people working within the factories of the future. So we are setting up vertical value chains within Slovenia and the horizontal networks. So bringing in different technologies that will be counterparts to you. So driven by private sector, backed up by the government. Things like tool making, biopharmacy, natural pharmacy and cosmetics, metallurgy, multi-component materials, coatings, different foods, different value chains in the food sector. We are not sure at this moment yet which chains will actually engage within Slovenia. We have celluloses and paper, plastics, energy, advanced construction materials, energy appliances, advanced housing units, mobility energy, E&M, health, and security. This is something that we are looking at, something that we're expecting, but something that we will really know in the next couple of months. And for each of those, you will have a phone number. And it's through those that we are also intent to pursue the internationalization strategy. To give you a specific example just going on, Digital Slovenia Horizontal Network, where chambers of commerce from Ljubljana to Skopje just signed the cooperation agreement how to promote digital transformation within what's now called the Western Balkans. These are the kinds of initiatives that we want to drive through these kind of partnerships, jointly supported by the government, but driven jointly by private sector, knowledge institutions, and the government. So there are a number of things that these partnerships will be doing, from strategy development, which is something which I said, prioritization is a process. We need to be looking at the long term in order to know where to invest now. What kind of research to do, you need to understand the future. Or at least you need to think about the future, and you will never understand it. It's about internationalization. It's about provision of joint services. It's about entrepreneurship. We have a technology park Ljubljana right there. We want to bring these vertical value chains and connect them with the, for example, startup community. There are a number of things which big guys, the blue chips, are not able to move around quickly enough. But if we merge them jointly with the support environment and push them also, it's not the government's role to fund. Our primary role is to push, to facilitate, to create an environment where these two groups of stakeholders will come together. And that, of course, requires, and I won't comment a lot, there was a question whether a smart specialization brings down policy silos. Well, it does so slowly. It's a that's my daily job. We are within the managing authority for the structural funds, and that gives us power because the ministries cannot go on their own. So my unit, everything to do with RTDI, everything to do with entrepreneurship, and everything to do with part of labor market measures, we need to approve that it's consistent with our smart specialization, which makes it, in a way, a mother of all strategies. But it's not the way how you change. It's, you have to go for coffees. Just everyone from the Balkans know. You have to do a lot of coffees. You need to, you have to have a stick, you have to have a carrot, and you have to have style, you have to have everything in order to convince slowly to change the way how ministries work. And we now have examples where we are, for example, when I said that we are moving forward with these strategic partnerships, on the same day we're launching the call for competence centers for human resource development. There was a call for RTDI, which was first joint call between Ministry of Economy and Ministry of Science. It would never, we said it's either jointly or no call. So it was, well, over coffee perhaps, but it was not easy. Okay, so my final point, Alesh is getting nervous. Internationalization. So this is the story that you get from our internationalization department. We are, the R&D hub, green hub, logistics hub. This is something that's in the middle of Euroborough. Which is, it gives a message, but it doesn't go far enough. So that's why we want to go a step forward. This I did yesterday. We're trying to, I'm a storyteller. We want, of course, to focus on thematic internationalization, jointly with those partnerships that I mentioned, jointly with companies, because the world is incredibly complex. So my first priority, of course, is to have a joint strategy for each of the priority areas, which will include, by definition, also the internationalization, where do those stakeholders want to focus, and then we will jointly go with them, but also vice versa, of course. One of the things here, for example, that we are particularly interested is, for example, Vanguard initiative. I understand there is someone from here, but in the factories of the future, this is a natural counterpart. This partnership will be a natural counterpart to participate, or rather to say that those stakeholders which will be in this partnership will be the natural counterparts to the stakeholders from the Vanguard initiative. This will come from partnerships themselves. Our job is, of course, to think also territorially. That's why, the 4 leaves. That's why we are also thinking about the territorial internationalization, which is one towards the north and west, to Baden-Württemberg, Munich, and then through Switzerland and France. One of the concrete examples and first focuses will be on clustering. We're a member of S3 for Alp Clusters initiative, where all the cluster organizations are participating from this region. Second one is the Visegrad 4+ cooperation, where we also agree that we will look at where we have joint interest in working together. 3, the Danube. 4, Adrian. Adrian, one example, open innovation, where again with this very institution where we are in, and with the technology park from Ljubljana, one of the projects that we're also strongly backing. We're looking at what will be going there. But jointly, and here I'm just backing, it's the Western Balkans, of course, that is very close to our heart, our priority as well. So, dame I gospođo, ja se nadam da ćemo danas moći još koju rečenicu na tu temu. And finally, of course, this is the European context. We are also thinking about the global one. So we are talking to OECD. OECD is a very big animal, so we're talking to part of the OECD, and I'll be talking to you later on, I hope. But through OECD, we're looking at how to broaden that further to the global level. We're also talking to countries like Norway, Turkey, and even Australia expressed interest. So, it's a very it's a rather complex world, but it's the global value chains that we're after. So, of course, Europe is not big enough. Okay, so basically, that's why. Well, that's the story of our smart specialization. Thank you.
Many thanks, Peter, for this very inspiring presentation. I'm sure that there will be some questions later, but let's move on because we don't have much time. So I would kindly invite Mrs. Kati Segati, Deputy Director for Education, Right to Study, High Learning and Research Department from Friuli Venezia Giulia region. And she will tell us a little bit on from the entrepreneur discovery process to S3 implementation in Friuli Venezia Giulia region. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to take part in this workshop organized by JRC, and thank you to Area Science Park for the hospitality. For our region, Friuli Venezia Giulia, this event is a really important opportunity for enterprises, for research center, policymakers to exchange best practices, to exchange view and knowledge to create a really competitive innovation ecosystem in a macro-regional area. In my contribution, I'll describe our experience and particularly the main feature of the regional smart specialization strategy and the methodology for building and implementing our smart specialization strategy. This is the summary of our smart specialization strategy. After the entrepreneurial discovery process on April 2015, the Regional Council approved the document concerning the regional smart specialization strategy, and then the document was updated on July 2015 with the inclusion of the policy mix. The policy mix contains information about financial resources, about financial action for the implementation of the strategy. And then the document was updated on April 2016 with technical changes regarding particularly the digital agenda and the action plans, the governance and the monitoring activities. Our smart specialization strategy was approved by the European Commission. Which are the most important characteristics? The smart specialization strategy is aiming at two fundamental expected change. The first change is the repositioning and consolidation of the industrial and production sector in the region in specific segment to the regional economic system that offer higher added value. And the other is the shift of the regional economic and production system toward new areas capable of generating new jobs, new markets, and new industry, starting with both traditional sectors and with high-tech sectors. Thanks to the process of entrepreneurial discoveries, we have identified a number of priorities aimed at achieving the expected change. In particular, the priorities are promoting the collaboration and the synergies between enterprises and between enterprises and the scientific structures, increasing the quality and the dissemination of innovation. The other priorities is promoting investment by the enterprises in innovation, in specialization of research results, and also through innovation services. And the third is promoting the new innovative entrepreneurship through the support of innovative startups and also with the contribution of cultural and creative enterprises. We have identified 5 areas of regional specialization through the process of entrepreneurial discovery. In particular, the 5 areas are agri-food, the strategic production chain that is divided into metalworking and home sectors, the maritime technologies, smart health, and culture, creative, and tourism. For each area, we have defined a set of development trajectories seen as a driver of innovation. That are the trajectories are relevant for the territory and can be implemented immediately. For each area, we have identified a cluster of reference. The cluster of reference has been identified by the regional law, particularly the regional law 3 of 2015, the regional rilancio impresa, and the law of research innovation 26 of 2005. Every cluster has the role to promote, to animate the reconnected area of specialization, to generate a driver of change. Every cluster has an important cluster manager body. For agri-food, the cluster manager is the Park of San Daniele Industrial District. For the home system is the agency for the development of the furniture cluster. For metalworking, the cluster manager body is the agency for the development of the industrial Kamet district. For the maritime technology, the cluster is the cluster Mare FVG or Maritime Technology Cluster, and for smart health, the cluster is the Technological District of Biomedicine. Mare FVG and CBN are the more mature clusters at the moment, and they represent the evolution of the previous regional technological district. The other clusters are in a building phase and are beginning their activities as an evolution of the previous industrial district. Now I'm going to describe the methodology for building and implementing the smart specialization strategy. The building process of the smart specialization strategy began in November 2014 and arrived to its first conclusion phase in July 2015. The methodology used include the following main features that are internal organizational model, entrepreneurial discovery, a participative governance model, and governance and implementation. About internal organization model, the regional government appointed internal staff for the design, the coordination, and the implementation activities. The important objectives was to capitalize the expertise of its staff and to develop specific skill and internal know-how. In particular, the region used employees from the regional structure that are closer to the matters dealt with the smart specialization strategy in research, innovation, and training. The structure are the manufacturing department of the Central Directory for Production Activities, the Education, Training, and Research department that I represent, and the ICT and e-government services. The other central directorates contribute to the construction of the strategy, and they ensure implementation of the smart specialization strategy in their area of competence. And so we have a really variable geometry model. Strategic intent result in the organizational model that we can see adopting within the regional administration. The model include a function of coordination of the three regional structures, a function of management and execution of the smart specialization strategy by a steering committee, and a function of technical and operational support provided by the technical secretariat, composed of the technical and administrative staff from the coordinating structures. The other feature is the entrepreneurial discovery. The development of the smart specialization strategy involve four phases. The phase of the preparation, the territorial consultation, the technical and scientific assessment, and the final presentation. The first desk preparation phase include documental analysis, the reference documentation also related to the regional operational program of the structural fund, the white paper on research, the evaluation reports of the previous program, and other studies have been analyzed together with field studies. This activity involved internal staff and also outside consultants. The second phase, the most important phase, was the real consultation phase, with a strong opening towards the territory. The board partnership involvement involved an online consultation and seven thematic groups dedicated to the regional specialization areas. The groups involve enterprises, university, research institution, policymaker, science and technology parks, class manager body, the world of finance, trade association, and also individual stakeholders. We involve more than 200 participant representative subjects. Thanks to this work, it was possible to identify priorities, areas of specialization, and the trajectories of in every area. Then the third phase was the work with the territory has been followed by the further scientific examination of the areas and the trajectory identified through the application of a scientific methodology. This methodology normalized the results with a specific prioritization criteria, and at the end of this process, the specialization area and the trajectory were defined. And then the fourth phase was the final work was presented and discussed in the General Assembly of the Smart Specialization Stakeholder, and this assembly was open to all the potential stakeholders. Another characteristic is the participative governance model. The model is a really bottom-up model. It was, the characteristic is a participatory planning. With the involvement of the territory, there was a gradual and selective focus on the topics carried out in shared manner in order to identify a limited number of innovation field and research priorities. Our goal was to have a critical mass of fund focused on few priorities and obtain a significant change and improvement with respect to the specific starting condition. The dialogue with the territory was made possible through the adoption of the participative governance model, with a varied opportunity to meet with the stakeholders. In particular, we can mention the thematic groups dedicated to the respective regional specialization area, the interaction with qualified and representative stakeholders from the social, production, and scientific sector of the territory, and finally, the General Assembly of the stakeholders. Now we are in the phase of implementation, and so the dialogue with the territory was made possible through the adoption and implementation of a highly participative governance model, which involved multiple and varied opportunities to meet with the stakeholders. With regard to the implementation, in accordance with the continuum of the entrepreneurial discovery process, the governance model involved to set up working groups steering at regional level. This group will be coordinated by the cluster of reference and with the participation of enterprises representing the social and economic landscape and of representative of the scientific community, and it has the presence also of the regional administration. These working groups are dedicated to individual specialization area. In particular, they discuss the updating of scientific and technological area and trajectories, the reference market and the significant challenge for the region, and discuss strategic and cross-cutting topics for the regional production and the scientific sectors. So this working group contribute to the review of the strategy. Then the proposal drafted in those forums were then submitted to the strategy committee. The strategy committee has the role of junction between the regional administration and the stakeholder. And then we have the General Assembly, that is the place in which the implementation of the smart specialization strategy is shared and discussed with the community of regional innovation. I think that this model of responsive, inclusive governance with a strong rooting in the territory wants to ensure the implementation of the strategy with a perspective of continuous development and cross-fertilization. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Katie. You have noticed that we have carefully chosen to present you the balanced view of regional and national smart specialization approaches. And just to mention you that we have actually issued the smart stories. It's a little booklet that is actually, we ran out of the hard copies, but they are available on the website for you to check, because these are different smart stories from around Europe, regional, national ones, and so on. So it probably makes sense to actually check it over the website. When we will have printouts, we can actually even send you. But anyway, it's available on the website. So without further ado, yes, in the meantime, our colleague, Mr. Tomislav Radoš, already took the stand. So he's a managing director from Croatian Center for Industrial Development, CIRAS. And we'll hear now for a few moments the key factor in smart specialization strategy implementation in Croatia. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to greet all of you, but it's only 10 minutes between lunch and the rest of this and the rest of the presentation. So I have only 5 minutes because I must give 5 minutes to my colleague from Vojvodina. So because of that, I definitely will skip some of my slide. But nevertheless, with this presentation, I will try to give you a brief overview of the role, goals, and expected result of the Center for Industrial Development, or CIRAS. Actually, I will talk only about the implementation of smart specialization strategy in Croatia. First of all, let me to describe how we came to an idea of having such a unique solution for implementation of national strategies. In order to do that, I will start with a few words about smart specialization process. That process was a concept that all three national strategies, industrial innovation and smart specialization strategy, were based on. That is process that aims to identify Croatia's strengths, but also key areas for improvement and investment, to review and update our national policy towards a knowledge-based economy for economic transformation of the region, to strengthen the private-public technology and knowledge transfer channels, and this is planned to be done through strengthening researchers and business collaboration, increasing opportunity for self-discovery activities, linking research and technological capacities with public support. S3 defined thematic priority areas that have most potential for future growth and development. These thematic priority areas in Croatia are health and quality of life, energy and sustainable environment, food and bioeconomy, transport and mobility, and security. During smart specialization process and during the process of creating S3, we kept thinking about how should we implement strategy in the most efficient way. Our process of strategic planning devoted equal attention to the strategy creation and to the strategy implementation. Strategy tells what should be done, and action plan tells what should be done, when it should be done, and how much money you need for it. But we kept thinking about the most efficient and possible way of implementing the S3. In other words, we talk about how it should be done. In order to answer that question, we had to look at the current situation regarding research, development, innovation, and overall competitiveness. The figures were, as you can see, quite disappointing, but I will not comment figures. After deeper research and analysis, we identify what is missing. This is new economic growth model, coordinated approach to sustainable socio-economic development, and, of course, implementation body or entity, which would carry out the operational target, objectives, and activities mentioned in the innovation, industrial, and smart specialization strategy. And that would be an adequate and efficient link with the scientific community, the state administration or policyholder, and the economy. And, of course, we came up with a unique and efficient solution, or CIRAS. CIRAS, or Center for Industrial Development, is established by the Croatian Chamber of Economy with the mission to support the strengthening of the national industrial development and with the vision to become a key factor of the Croatian institutional framework of the implementation of industrial, innovation, and smart specialization strategy. And of course, for every implementation, you need money. And in this case, for implementation of S3, national and European Union sources of funding are available. And we find the way to manage the use of operational structural investment fund to support implementation of S3, together with Croatian Chamber of Economy's participation of 50%. So 85% comes from Regional Development Fund and 50% from a Croatian Chamber of the Economy. In the next few slides, you can see the main goals. You will see the main goals and expected result of the CIRAS in the next 4 years. But, so the main goals, actually the main word is support. So the main goals are to support the industrial development of Croatia and strengthening the competitiveness of Croatian economy, support the strengthening of the position of Croatia in global value chain, support the knowledge strengthening and skills of business sector, and etc. But as a result of conducted activities of CIRAS, we expected to have established system for evaluating and monitoring evaluation programs and supports, establish innovation web platform, recommendation for improving innovation systems, programs, and measures of innovation policies, business sectors R&D strategies for identify S3 priority areas, provided professional and technical support to the preparation of technical documentation for project ideas that includes the preparation and review of feasibility studies, including cost-benefit analysis, the preparation of technical part of the project, and preparation of relevant tender documents. Also, we expect to have developed 13 global value chains and defined strategic segments in order to upgrade the industry, identify specific niches and related markets to attract foreign direct investment with 13 thematic areas, and I will not read all of these. Finally, establish Academy for Industrial Development and Competitiveness Summer School. I also want to highlight that CIRA's team employees will be educated and trained by the professional institution, such as World Bank, Industry Specialized, etc. That is one of the programs of Ministry of Economy for strengthening the capacity of Croatian Chamber of Economy as a partnering institution in implementation of S3 innovation and industrial strategy. And for the conclusion, basic precondition for economic development is a strong cooperation between academic community, economy, and government. The main reason for funding CIRAS is to create and support the implementation of industrial and related policy, innovative and related policy, and of course, smart specialization strategies. CIRAS serves as a support to strengthening national competitiveness through the support to the strengthening of the national innovation system and continuous education related to industrial development. So thank you for your attention. I will be available today and tomorrow for the questions, everything what you will have to ask us about the process of designing S3, because we invest 3 years in defining S3 from 2012 until 2016, and more than 1,000 participants were involved in this process. Thank you.
Many thanks, Tomislav, for keeping it short. You see, it's possible to do it even within the 5 minutes. So, yeah, last but not least, the floor is yours. Uroš Liljak, standing in for Marija Vujaković from Serbia, to tell us a little bit on smart specialization experiences of autonomous province of Vojvodina.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Buongiorno. I'm, like colleague said, Uroš, from Business Standardization and Certification Center from Vojvodina region in Serbia. First of all, I would like to point out that Vojvodina is the first non-EU region included in the S3 map, because we have developed both regional innovation strategy and cross-border innovation strategy. As most of you know, Serbia is a country with serious economic problems, and we are facing many challenges on our road to accelerated economic growth, accelerated sustainable economic growth. And in the global market, accelerated sustainable economic growth can be achieved only through innovation jumps. Gradual development is not enough for our country, because it is characterized by a serious technological underdevelopment in comparison to the developed EU. As luck would have it, lucky circumstances have occurred. The second IPA call for proposal, and the corresponding partner from Hungary was a way to respond to these challenges and to begin the process of smart specialization. The cross-border cooperation, began with the IPA project. The partner from Hungary transferred knowledge for the elaboration of this document to us, and on the basis of lessons learned, we quickly adopted this methodology and implementation, and begin on developing regional innovation strategy for Vojvodina region and cross-border innovation strategy between the South Great Plain of Hungary and Vojvodina. Methodology transferred to us mostly consisted in the sectors of planning and implementation. Therefore, and because of that, we started with the training, with the organization of trainings and workshops for participants from Vojvodina. We also created 2 sets of questionnaires for each innovation driver in both regions, and also a database of all innovation actors from both regions was compiled in order to establish a network and cooperation among these 2 regions. Also, primary data collection was done on the basis of 100 responses. So it meant going on a field and talking directly to all innovation actors. Statistical analysis of the questionnaires was done in order to draw up appropriate conclusions. Secondary data collection consisted of benchmarking, and using appropriate literature. As a benchmark, we used the region of Helsinki in Finland. And this was all done for the preparation of strategies. And so all the data processing, all the analysis of all these aspects gave us the current situation the Vojvodina was back then, and all its innovation aspects. And all those comprehensive data processing, inputs from stakeholders, also feedbacks from organized public discussions, as well as peer reviews, we managed to determine priority sectors for region of Vojvodina, which are agricultural production and food industry, and information and communication technology. Also key horizontal principles were established, like ecology, environment protection, energy efficiency, as well as renewable energy sources. During the period of 2 years, thanks to the inputs like from stakeholders, public discussions, peer reviews, the original document went through considerable transformation and was finally adopted by government of Vojvodina as an official strategic document for Vojvodina region. So, action plan we established included these activities. The document also established the way for monitoring and evaluation, but the implementation does not run according to plan. It's simply, our greatest challenge is how to start innovation process in a system when the main innovation drivers are acting independently, when there is almost no cooperation and communication between industry and education. And this posed one of the biggest barriers for the implementation of smart specialization. As you can see, benefits from adoption of smart specialization are clearly image of current situation, strengthening cooperation among innovation drivers, spillover effect, focus on establishing priorities, eligibility for Horizon 2020, cross-border and transnational cooperation in R&D. As you can see, okay, so these are some of the benefits, but the main problem is when there is no determined functional innovation process, and when there is an absence of activation energy, so the minimum energy needed to start any process. Also, problems that we faced came also from political discontinuity, and also from having necessary financial tools for the implementation. So, and also in our smart specialization, we also consider intellectual property rights as one of the most evident problem SME face in their innovation process. So, but that's a theme for another time and theme. Thank you so much.
Many thanks, Uroš. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the time that we can have a few questions. Any immediate questions? I would like to announce actually that we will put all the presentations on our website. So if you have any questions with regard to see the slides, we'll put them there in a few days. And also that there will be a bit more time for discussion during the afternoon session that our colleague, Mr. Veskovic, will actually moderate, because there are only 3 presentations there and you have 1 hour and a half. So we can have some discussion there, okay? But still, we are allowing now some time. I mean, we are eating up into lunch, but there's 1 hour, so we can have some questions. Please, the floor is yours. Any immediate questions, or everybody is hungry? Yes, please.
Sorry. Well, thank you to all presenters. It was really great to learn different stories. My question goes to our colleague from Austria. I'm really impressed what has been achieved recently in Austria in different fields. Let me just mention Open Innovation Strategy, which is published very recently, and Austria will go into that direction. But maybe question in another way. You come from Federal Ministry of Science, Research and Economy. And I really believe that is the perfect place for preparing and implementing and managing a smart specialization strategy. That's one issue. I would like your comment on that, because that's not the case in some of the other countries. But you achieved something fantastic in relation to higher education institution, which is always very difficult to achieve. And there is a different ministry responsible for higher education in Austria. No, you are the same. Okay, well, so I would appreciate your comment about, first of all, economy as part of your ministry, and then, of course, about the role of higher education and how you manage to deal with higher education institutions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Veskovic. Yeah, indeed, it's a joint ministry of the former Ministry of Science and Research, which takes care also of higher education in Austria, and the Ministry of Economy. That's been done since we have the current government, and we are headed by our Vice Chancellor, Mr. Mitterlehner. Technically, this would be the Smart Specialization Ministry, really. Yeah. If you hadn't to deal with different cultures of ministries, of bureaucracies, I mean, you all know it from your own organization and institutions, and also I wouldn't exclude the European Commission, that sometimes inter-service dialogue and alignment is not so easy. No, but generally, I think it's a good idea to have that joined in one ministry, because we really have the whole chain from the higher education towards the markets, and there are mutual opportunities of mutual inspiration. Definitely, yes. That's been a good idea. And about higher education in Austria, well. We got a culture of strategy building where we have a very strong involvement of companies and firms and enterprises. We are a country of the social partnership, of the so-called. So that's quite a strong sector in Austria. It might be different in other countries where you have to bring in companies. Definitely, instead of higher education institutions. In our case, it's really something that much is happening between higher education institutions and companies, and there are many intermediary projects and instruments like COMET centers and Christian Doppler Society, and many things that facilitate, and cluster policies that facilitate close cooperation between universities and the markets. So that works quite fine. Still, it's hard to persuade public institutions like universities that in the Austrian case are only autonomous since the year of 2002. And they had a process of adopting their culture to a managerial form of being autonomous and strategic actors. So we found that it was particularly relevant to address the knowledge institutions, to team up and to also communicate. Much is done, as I said, much is being done in contacts, but sometimes it's not really communicated enough. Just as an example, I made a reference to the Graz case, and there are 4 universities, including a tiny little University of the Arts. But this University of the Arts is highly relevant in developing things for the automotive cluster that is not seen. They are developing sound concepts of how a Mercedes has to sound differently from a BMW and so on. When the University of Technology of Graz is invited to the automotive fair in Paris, they call their colleagues from the University of Graz, who are doing studies on demographic change and how this affects the automotive industry, but they are also phoning their colleagues from this tiny little University of the Arts. And these success stories of working together, they need to be really put at the forefront and also communicated in a regional context. If you cooperate with a certain region, you don't cooperate with a single institution or a single company, but with a whole network that makes this region. And in terms of macro regional cooperation, this network doesn't end at regional borders. It comprises wherever proximity matters, it's a matter of connection, and it's a cluster of connected institutions and companies.
Many thanks. Any additional immediate questions? Yes, please, Jan Laros there, DG Regio.
Thank you for these very inspiring stories, success stories. That's what we need. And I would address a question to Peter, because of course he has a good capacity of storytelling. And one of your phrases that also struck me was that you don't talk too much about barriers, because it's by discovering opportunities that you convince stakeholders to, let's say, tackle barriers for getting to these opportunities. So in regards to barriers, it might be important, of course, for policymakers also to know what are the challenges for the next step. And I was very much inspired by your focus on internationalization, because at the end, it's finding counterparts for what we all are trying to manage in our own regions to strengthen our capabilities, but in a broader context, we need these counterparts. So my question to you is, what do you see as the main barriers to accelerate this process of finding counterparts and of internationalization in general? And what are the needs at this moment for you to, let's say, continue your success story?
Thank you. I think you have to start by understanding what kind of region one is coming from. And I think for the regions that are here, we have very different starting points. Ours was that we have a relatively good starting point in terms of competitiveness, and that was something where we have an advantage. But that said, companies are nevertheless too much short-term focused. So hence the benefits of international cooperation are not are not obvious enough to them, because it's a medium term, it's an investment that will bring dividends in the medium to longer term. That's one reason. And the second reason, in international cooperation, sometimes I was stunned by even how what appeared to me as a really small cost was actually considered as a significant cost even by blue chip companies. And the reason for that is that blue chip companies in our region are actually rather small. So they're really counting on every euro that they're investing. That's why the barrier was that if you go it alone, you can't do it. That's why it's so important, in my opinion, that the government facilitates and promotes the environment that stakeholders come together, because then you get this economies of scale whereby you're not just able to cover the costs, but you're also able to convince the ones that you want to cooperate with that you're actually bringing something to them, not that you come there to take from them. So I think it's both ways. It's to generate what your offer, and on the second, it's to share costs. I think that was the base. And once you create that environment of more forward-looking atmosphere, and there, you know, it's really interesting when you go into that, how many people that you would not expect, like artists, can actually contribute. We're doing the kind of the same thing. We're trying to bring these people together. We're trying to build bridges, and that's where we see our primary role, not to distribute money, but to create the environment and to facilitate the process.
There's, of course, on top of it, also the role of the European Smart Specialization Platform, which is trying to facilitate, you know, connections in between regions, collaborations around specific parts of the process, around thematic areas. So we will later on, actually, in the third session, discuss about the value chains and the specific thematic platforms that are being formulated on particularly important value chains that have kind of showed up in as an important in the region. So there's also a role, and we can also play this role for the Western Balkan countries. I mean, as I said, we are open. Our platform is open for the countries from the Western Balkan, and actually, you know, by registering, you actually start getting into these loops, into these contacts in different events, different workshops, different thematic workshops, different activities that are going in different levels in the EU, and that way you actually, you know, learn and also, you know, share your experiences. Actually, you allow the other people to know what you do, where you're strong, and so on. So this is kind of creating kind of a European network. It can work within the macro-regional experiences, but it can work also in the outside the macro-regional frame. So for you, it's important. The macro-regional framework is important because these countries, Western Balkan, is actually in the two regions, two macro-regional strategies. So and actually Slovenia even in three. So there's a lot of opportunities, but you know, you need to start getting involved, because better sooner than later, because that way you actually by step you're entering into these networks. So. Until there is, well, we are actually 20 minutes almost into the lunch, so I would suggest that we stop the discussion here. Many thanks for, well, firstly to the distinguished speaker for their presentations, and to the audience for listening us. And I guess we have about, well, 45 minutes for lunch. Yeah, thank you.